Welcome friends to the 2024 Mazda CX-90. This is the plug-in hybrid premium plus model. The big highlight here is that new inline-6 turbocharged engine. I have not tried it personally, but that's what's getting all of the attention and praise. And I'm sure that's a great engine, actually. In fact, that's most likely what I would go for. I would personally pick a Turbo S model of this SUV, and that's going to go for around $53,000, $54,000, which is not bad. The way they have this SUV priced is amazing. So the inline-6, that's good. We have here the new 8-speed automatic transmission. Of course, they're offering this plug-in hybrid as well. And suspension-wise, the suspension architecture is proper. You got double wishbones in the front, multi-link in the rear. Everything on paper is adding up beautifully. The plug-in hybrid, it is producing 323 horsepower, 369 pounds-feet of torque. These are all combined outputs, including the power of the 4-cylinder engine, the lithium-ion battery pack. All of that produces the numbers that I just stated. The inline-6 turbo comes in two different flavors, a detuned version with 280 horsepower and the upgraded S models, which come with a 340 horsepower. Again, that S model with 340 horsepower, that's what I would go with. And the reason for that is because this plug-in hybrid variant, it doesn't really suit the character of this CX-90 very well. It feels lethargic in the EV mode, right, which is what I'm in right now. I step on it, very slow, okay? Yeah, there's nothing effortless about that. And 26 miles of pure EV range, that's a bit on the low side. I would have liked to see 30, 35 miles. When you drive it in the normal mode, then the plug-in hybrid variant, it goes between using the 4-cylinder power, the engine power, alongside the EV battery pack power. And even in that mode, the vehicle becomes very slow. In fact, when you do everyday driving, that engine kicks in quite often in the normal mode, which means even the vehicle understands that the EV power alone is not enough to properly move this thing around, because this weighs 500 pounds more than the inline-6 variants. Inline-6 models weigh 4,700 pounds. This is 5,200 pounds. But I will say, when you flip the toggle switch and you put it into the sport mode, then the vehicle becomes genuinely quick. Now you start to feel the thrust and it becomes legitimately quick at that point. But sadly, the sport mode is not convenient to drive around in all the time after all. The engine makes a racket. It's just not the dignified experience that you want out of a product such as the CX-90. But it does become quick in that mode, but again, the refinement's not there, so I just leave it in either the normal or the pure EV mode. I just don't want to have to listen to a 4-cylinder engine. They actually do a good job in making the 4 cylinders quiet and refined in the other Mazda products, like your CX-30s, CX-5s, CX-50s, all that good stuff. Even the CX-9, right? All of these vehicles have 4-cylinder engines and they're quiet and pretty refined. But some of the pros of this drivetrain, when the engine kicks on, you hardly even notice it. It's really refined in that aspect. And this 8-speed automatic is excellent the way that they have it tuned. You hardly even notice the vehicle shifting as well. So that's what I'm saying. If you got this with the inline-6 engine, the additional power, the smoothness of that particular engine alongside this 8-speed automatic, that would truly be an excellent combination, I think. Something that would really suit the character of this. Moving on from the drivetrain, let's talk more about the handling and the ride comfort. We have here the 21-inch wheels, and I have to say, this vehicle does ride a little bit stiff over certain types of roads. I understand why that is, because to achieve a decent handling characteristic such as what this SUV has, they have no choice. They have to stiffen up the suspension. It doesn't ride terrible. It's just that you notice certain bumps a little bit more than you probably should. Again, 98% of the time it rides pretty good. body control is well contained. Nobody's flipping over onto themselves. Mazda does a very good job in handling dynamics for the most part. The base wheel option is a 19-inch wheel, and that would honestly help, but it looks nowhere near as good as these 21s. And when you go with something like a preferred plus model that has the 19-inch wheels, you forego a lot of the attractive options that make this car great, like the Bose audio system, which I will talk more about in the interior segment. I will say, out on the highway, the ride quality is amazing. It has like this floating sensation when you're driving it at higher speeds, which is pretty cool. I like the way this car achieves that. So as a highway cruiser, this is pretty good. It's even relatively quiet, not too much wind noise, not too much tire noise, but I have to say the BMW X5s, things of that nature, they are quieter still. But even that's not really a big deal. The reason why this does not really take the throne away from some of those European cars is because this SUV, it just doesn't feel as effortless to drive as something like the X5. There's a little bit more resistance to the steering. There's a little bit more rolling resistance to this CX-90 in general. The lethargic plug-in hybrid drivetrain doesn't really help out. Everything about it just feels like it requires more effort to drive than some other SUV products. And I'm not just talking about the German competitors. Even when you compare this to vehicles like the Kia Telluride, the Palisades, the Mazda's own CX-9 actually, and even the new Nissan Pathfinder, even when you compare to three-row front-wheel drive based SUVs like that, this still lacks that effortless feel that I've come to appreciate with a lot of the other larger SUV products. Heck, even the Chevy Suburban I tested, right? One of the largest production SUVs that you can get, even that product displayed a more effortless driving nature. Something like the Suburban did a great job in masking its size, and the steering was a little bit more effortless. Again, some of these things are difficult to explain. I get it. I am a car reviewer. I'm going to notice some of these nuances. If you happen to just test drive the CX-90 on its own, almost everyone is going to be thoroughly impressed with it. I'm not saying that this is a bad product. This SUV does a lot of things well, but the reality is this is no real threat to, the German competitors. And even if you're an owner of a Telluride, a freaking new Pathfinder, or a CX-9 even, there's no reason to trade that in and upgrade to this. This will not light your world on fire. That's the point I'm trying to make. Again, this is not the threat to the market that I thought it was going to be. But it is a good product. I do like it. And once again, on paper, this is clutch. I mean, you got yourself a rear-wheel drive based architecture. You have amazing suspension geometry, some excellent engine options. At this point, what they need to do is they need to refine and massage these products, similar to what they've been doing with their other Mazda vehicles like the CX-5s, the CX-9s. I noticed that over the years, those SUVs kept getting better year after year. They started to drive a little bit sharper, a little bit smoother. That's what they need to do with this vehicle, because if they did do that, if they did subtle tweaks and changes year after year, this has the potential to be one of the best SUVs on the market, no doubt about it. And again, I have not tried the inline six, so that could be better still. It's a lighter weight vehicle. It comes with more power. It comes with a smoother engine. But the way that this sits, it's hard to recommend because there's no real deals going on for this SUV either. Most dealerships are charging MSRP or even over MSRP, and that's just not cool, especially when you can get a CX-9 Mazda for a deep discount. I've seen brokers on the Lease Hacker forum offering up to 10% off MSRP on CX-5s and CX-9s. That's a much better value proposition. I love Mazda. I would personally daily drive a Mazda product. If I was in the market for a regular vehicle, I would get a select trim level of a CX-5 non-turbo for around 30 grand, take advantage of the 10% off discounts. That's what I would personally drive. And if you needed something larger and you want to stay in the Mazda family, again, CX-9 at 10% off, that's really hard to beat. Especially since this CX-90 is not much bigger than the CX-9, and we'll talk more about that in the interior segment. Okay, now that we are stopped, let's go ahead and let's talk about this interior space. Now, I know in the driving segment, it seemed like I didn't like this or I thought the vehicle sucked. Many people assume that because I don't have this overly cartoonish, hyped up voice. So, no, that's not the case. I do like it. In fact, the interior space is a truly high quality space to spend time in. What do I mean by that? Well, everything is solid. Nothing is creaking or rattling in here. In fact, I would say this is the most solid Mazda interior that I have ever experienced. When you open and close the doors, they feel extremely solid, more so than some of the other Mazda vehicles. So I appreciate that premium touch. I also appreciate the gold stitching and some of the other gold accents that this SUV has. The technology is on point. I believe this is a 12.3-inch infotainment screen, and if you go with some of the lower trim levels, you will get a smaller 10.25-inch infotainment, I believe, which is fine. But all of these models, they will come with wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. That works flawlessly, no issues, no hiccups, no glitches. That's not a problem for me. And in general, even the Mazda infotainment is great. It's simplistic. It's not distracting in any way. You access the Mazda portion of the infotainment with this rotary dial, but once you go into your Apple CarPlays, then you can utilize the touchscreen or the touch element of the screen. A 12.3-inch digital gauge cluster comes standard with all of the CX-90s, and this is also really well done. Easy to use, shows you some great information, and the clarity of both screens are amazing as well. We also have a heads-up display with this particular CX-90. In fact, the only real things that I don't like about this interior is this kind of plasticky silver material. I wish they would have used a matte wood material instead. I think that would have been a more premium touch. This kind of plastic feeling element is not that great. I'm also not a huge fan of this goofy gear shifter. Totally unnecessary. It's a digital shifter. I wish Mazda would have implemented like a button system or even a dial, if you will, for the shifter. That would have been a more elegant solution and something that would have given the customer more space with the center console here. But you got yourself two cup holders, and I love the way Mazda gives you separated controls and displays for the climate. That is phenomenal. I wish more car companies would do this, but in fact most car companies are doing away with the separate buttons and switches for the climate. It's just Mazda does everything to make their vehicles as non-distracting as possible while you drive. So that's good. The center armrest space could have been a little bit larger, but it's okay. The glove box is a decent size. The door pockets can house a fairly large bottle, and a huge highlight with this interior space is the amazing Bose audio system. The clarity, the bass, it's all phenomenal. I would go as far as to say this is the best implementation of the Bose audio in a Mazda product, and I just think it's imperative to get this audio system if you're going to be buying a Mazda CX-90. It's a huge highlight. I like it. This pano sunroof, that definitely adds some life to this interior as well. The seats are extremely comfortable in typical Mazda fashion. Pretty decent lumbar support, very comfortable on a long trip. But I must say, this interior space isn't all that spacious. I expected this to be a much larger vehicle, but it's really not. Interior wise, this is very similar to the CX-9 actually, which is quite disappointing because I believe Mazda increased the wheelbase of the CX-90 by over 7 inches compared to a CX-9, but the reality is there's not that much more legroom in here. In fact, I think the second row seats have the same legroom as the CX-9. It's only the front, and I think even the third row that gets slightly better legroom. And because we have a fully loaded plug-in hybrid here, we have captain's chairs in the back. You got yourself heated seats, manually adjusted sunshades, Those are all great features. People will enjoy sitting in the second row, no problem. I'm 5'11", I have no issues getting in and out or fitting in the first and the second row, but that third row is atrocious. I absolutely cannot fit in there. If I am going to fit back there, the second row occupant will have pretty much no real leg room. They're not going to be very comfortable. In fact, even with the second row pushed all the way back, it's no Maybach, certainly. I actually think in the real world, the CX-9 had a more comfortable second and third row seating space. I actually had more room to fit in those vehicles. I have no idea why, because on paper it's about the same, but somehow the CX-9 felt more comfortable to sit in both the second and the third row. Don't ask me why, that's just what I thought, because these third row seats, totally useless. It's not much better than the 2023 Pathfinder I recently tested. So the best thing to do, in my opinion, is just to fold them down, and at that point you have a massive trunk in the rear. I mean, even with the third row up, the trunk space isn't terrible, but once you put it down and you enjoy this as a two-row vehicle, yeah, then it becomes extremely practical, and there is a spare tire in the back. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and let's transition over into the conclusion segment, because there I will talk more about the value proposition of the CX-90 and if it's going to be right for you and your family. Is this CX-90 right for you? Well, now that you've seen it, now that you've heard my thoughts about it, it's really going to be up to you if this is going to be worth purchasing, because as I mentioned before, there's no real deals going on with the CX-90. Dealerships are charging even over MSRP, and that absolutely sucks, especially since this third row is useless. The best way to utilize this is with the third row down and to have a bench seat for the second row. That would be the most practical application, but then you have to ask yourself, is it worth lugging around all this extra weight and this extra size, something that's more difficult to park or even fit inside of a garage? Is it worth that sacrifice? When it comes to these three-row SUVs, just about all of them are extremely compromised. In fact, the only useful third row I've ever experienced is in a Ford Expedition and a Chevy Suburban. And clearly those products are not for everyone. So it's really going to be on you. Is this going to be worth your while, worth the additional price, when you can get things like the CX-5 or even the CX-9 for a lot less money? This is May 2023. I'm not sure what the new lease deals are like, but I did see that previously the Mazda leases for CX-5s and CX-9s were amazing, almost 0% interest on the lease. So most people could have done a 2-year lease, enjoyed a new Mazda, and then if they liked it, they could have just paid cash for the remaining balance and owned the vehicle outright at pretty much, again, no interest. So you tack on the amazing lease deals, no interest, nice discounts, and even like a $500 loyalty credit or a $500 regional incentive. That was a great deal. This, not so much. But that being said, that doesn't mean I hate this vehicle. It does a lot of things great. I love this 8-speed transmission. The driving nature overall is very good, and I'm sure that inline 6 is going to be amazing, especially the S models with more horsepower. That should be a lot more effortless, especially since it weighs less. I am looking forward to what Mazda does with this platform in the future and what they plan to do regarding tweaks and changes to the CX-90 to make this even better. I'm looking forward to seeing that, and I'm looking forward to products like the CX-70 as well. A smaller vehicle with the same power plants, I'm assuming. That should be really nice. So I love Mazda. I would consider buying the CX-5s and the CX-9s, and that's personally what I would have on my driveway. So hopefully this video was valuable to you. If it was, and if you appreciate how real I keep it in these reviews, consider subscribing and liking. It would mean a lot to me. But for now, I will have my next video on the end screen here. Click on it and I will see you there.